This episode is proudly supported by Fine Food Australia. It's only a few weeks until Fine Food Australia, the country's leading trade event for food service and hospitality, is back on in Sydney. As a professional in the food industry, you know the importance of staying ahead, discovering new trends, connecting with suppliers, and finding the inspiration to move your business forward. For over 40 years, Fine Food Australia has been the ultimate destination for chefs, restaurateurs, cafe owners, food retailers, and distributors alike. With over 900 exhibitors across 12 product categories, featuring both local and global brands, Fine Food Australia is where you'll find what's next, what's new, and what's driving the food industry forward. Make sure you register online before the 8th of September to secure free trade entry, so you don't have to pay $45 at the door. Don't miss Fine Food Australia on from the 8th to the 11th of September at ICC Sydney Darling Harbour. For more information, go to www.finefoodaustralia.com.au.
They're now making 50, 60k net profit for themselves every month in a business where they were making no money, but it was always there. And to be able to do that for someone by just sharing what I know, why wouldn't you want to do that for a job?
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Running your own hospitality business has its challenges, but what's it like peering through the window and finding the right solutions to help other businesses? With passion and an extreme sense of self in most hospitality offerings, is it hard to instill change in a venue to help it prosper? Olivia Casson is a hospitality consultant and hospitality broker based in Sydney. Olivia, how are you?
Very good, thanks. How are you, Huck?
I'm good. It's good to get you on the show. Your job is multifaceted, helping hospitality businesses and then also helping them with an exit strategy. Just tell us a little bit about what you do.
So I work with hospitality businesses and I will help them, especially independent businesses, and I will help them to look at their business completely objectively and give them some advice based on my experience on how they could do things better for them. So whether that's helping them just get a life back and not be a slave to the business, which, you know, you see a lot in that kind of, especially in what we deal with, which is smaller independents often, helping it become more profitable. And the kind of subject that I'll talk about Fine Foods is getting them ready for selling a business, not necessarily because they want to sell straight away, but you know, I suppose not just selling, exiting a business. And I think that there's a bit of a mystery around what is an exit strategy. Why do I need one? You know, it's my choice. I'll sell when I'm ready, and actually, we are not always prepared. So, because what we don't think about is what if something terrible happens. And I know that sounds doom and gloom, and we call it the 5 Ds, and I can normally only remember 3 of them. But, you know, the first one is pretty obvious. And then, you know, divorce, disability is another. You don't choose that. And you can leave, you know, it sounds a bit catchy, but you can leave a legacy for your family, or you can leave a liability. And all those people that work for you. So I think it's about having that someone objective look at your business and go, hey, this is great. This bit's amazing. I wish everyone did this. These bits, other people do better, and I'm going to show you how they do it. And I'm going to keep you protected so you're always in a good spot. And that's, you know, I mean, I love what I do.
Tell us a bit about the circumstances that most operators come to you, you know, that they're in. Are they usually in a position where they see that they need change, but they don't know what it is, or are they just looking to get better? Like, what's the most common scenario for you?
It's a combination. I suppose the first one is that people go, I've been thinking about selling my business. That's the first way in which people come to me or come to us. And normally they, that someone said, hey, speak to Olivia, she knows what she's talking about, which is a nice recommendation. Now, a lot of time, people go, okay, so I've been thinking about selling my business, and you might not hear from them for another 2 years after you've had an initial few conversations with them, which is great, because it's a big decision. So that's probably the most usual circumstance. I think the most tragic circumstance is when you have people that go, okay, I want to sell my business and I want to sell it in a week. First of all, I won't do that. That's not how we work. There are people out there if that's what you want. But I don't want people to get ripped off. So I often will coach people into, well, why don't we give it X amount of weeks before we start to lose your business, and here's all the reasons why. And it's normally got a huge amounts of dollar signs on there, as opposed to giving away blood, sweat and tears, sacrifice, missing kids' birthdays, weddings, bar mitzvahs, and aside. And I think because I've come from the industry, I get it. I understand what has gone into it. It's easy to fall in and out of love with it. And on those occasions when people fall out of love with it, you can get a lot of phone calls. And I think, what we're trying to do is assess, is this just a roller coaster, or is this a real situation? And just guide them. So whether that's coaching, consulting, or actually planning their exit and then listing their business for sale. So there's two circumstances. I'm thinking about it in a couple of years and I want to know how it works. And then now's the time, and then explains to people, well, actually, the whole process takes a bit of time, and if you listed it today, you'll get X amount for it, and if you listed it in 6 months' time after we've done some work on it, you'll get X amount, oftentimes 4 or 5. So does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Change is often difficult for many of us to confront, but, in hospitality businesses are usually deeply personal projects. What's it like coming in as a consultant and sort of advising for change? What's the uptake rate of that sort of advice sometimes? Is it challenging sometimes to get some operators to go in a certain direction?
I think that I would have said, if you asked me 10 years ago, I would have said, yeah. Anyone that's worked in hospitality knows. Okay, so that I've done it myself. Okay, I remember when I was a head chef and someone had walked in the kitchen and I didn't know them, and that's it. It's my territory. Who are you? What are you doing? You're really kind of feisty about it. And I certainly, when the first couple of consulting roles I would have taken on, which would have been back home in the UK, very often you were employed by the owner, okay, not necessarily, and very often their problem would have been in the kitchen, okay, although I do everything, right? So they're asking you to go in and work with their head chef, or sometimes their executive chef who's been with them a real long time, and you think, okay, how am I going to play this? Because no chef or their team wants some girl sniffing around telling them what they're doing isn't right, or there's a better way, I suppose, is the more diplomatic, but it's not right, because that's why I've been called in, right? And I would say that, thankfully, I think the fact that I have come from the industry and the fact that I worked in every kind of kitchen you've ever thought of, I could quite quickly get them to understand that I'm not. And I'd put my whites on too. I'm not going in with a clipboard and a suit drinking coffee, which is that kind of chef's mindset of what a consultant does. I go in and if they're in service and they're stuck, I help them. I'll clean their fridges with them. I'll do what anyone does. I'll find a way to connect with them and understand I'm not the bad guy. Actually, if you work with me, your life will be easier. There'll be a bit more money in the pot. You can probably have more than one broken wooden spoon. It's explaining what I'm there for and why I'm there. And it's definitely not to work again. And I very quickly integrate into one of the team. And I think that the skills that I learned at that kind of very hands-on type of consulting that I would do at the beginning of my career has helped me to paint the picture of what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And then if that fails, the truth is that normally you can show someone, even that's quite resistant, just a spreadsheet and go, okay, if you don't do this, you're going to get this is how much money you're going to lose, make, not make. And if you do everything, I absolutely guarantee this is how much money you're going to start to make, or these are the problems that are going to go away. And that's very, if you can't just get through to them on a human level, numbers and being really confident that you can do what you've said you'll deliver. But numbers deliver. There's a big difference between you can get 100 grand for your business, or you can get $700,000 for your business. People suddenly go, okay, I'll do it.
Yeah. Well, I want to sort of explore the consulting side of things, and also exit strategies for those that might be considering that, a couple of years down the track. But you've had a long career in hospitality, but take us back to when you were really young. Whereabouts did you grow up, and was food a big part of your family?
So I grew up in the UK, an area near Manchester. We were Manchester United supporters, for anyone that has an interest. And food. Okay, the actual quality of food that we consumed was not an incentive for me to go into. Well, it might have been an incentive because I probably wanted to eat better. Okay, so my mum has a very difficult relationship with food, and my grandparents, no one really. Actually, it's probably going to be quite offensive. I suppose that Central Eastern European and Russian food is not necessarily everyone's idea. It's not the Italian of the food world, let's say. So my motivation to, my love of food, and I think was more around, there was some, I didn't live in a strict household at all, but there were certain rules around, we had dinner together every night and we sat at the table, no TV, no sitting and watching, desperately wanted to eat dinner off my knee on the sofa like I could at some friends' houses. No, we waited for my dad and we all sat around and we ate around the table. And then on a Friday night, we would go to my grandparents' house where we would have, a family dinner. Often my cousins would be there that were similar age. And I think that what I loved about that is it's not about the food, it's about the hospitality. And that's still what I love about hospitality and just having, friends round at home. I love that kind of just bit of sharing. It sounds cliche, but just sharing food and sharing stories and, drinking nice drinks. And I enjoy that. And I think that has come from, it's that time where you stop, scrolling your screen, watching TV, and actually commit to the people that you're with. Oh, that's the ideal, right? So it wasn't that food played a huge part in terms of, oh, this is delicious, I hope I can recreate this meal. But the meal time, I think, is the bit that kind of got me into how do I do this all the time?
Yeah. Tell us about those steps. What were your first steps in hospitality, and what was it like for you?
I think like many people, probably. So I started off washing up. I knew I wanted to be a chef from I wanted to be a vet or a chef. And my parents very politely informed me from a young age that I was not smart enough to be, or not academic enough to be a vet. So that was it. Apart from a brief idea of maybe being a photographer, and then realizing I couldn't use a camera. But it had always been kind of what I wanted to do, or I probably thought I wanted to be a cook. Who knows? And so I was always cooking at home, and then I started off washing up at the local pub, and obviously washing up, then peeling onions, then chopping mushrooms. Oh, this is real fun, and it got me into it. The food again in this particular pub was dreadful, but the experience of it and the cooking bit. I then enrolled in catering college. And throughout that, I worked in like local restaurants and bistros. I'd work 3 or 4 nights a week. I really loved it. And, I'd be running shifts and stuff at kind of 19. I mean, I realize now that the quality of what I was doing was probably not what I would advise, but, they were what they were. But I had a desperately wanted. I was so, just wanted to be the best. I wanted to be really good at what I did, and I suppose I still really want to be good at what I do. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna try and work at the best place I possibly can. Now, so I'm from Manchester, in the north of the UK, northwest, and I mean, we would have been talking the mid to late 90s. There were actually only something like four, five Michelin star restaurants in the UK. I think there was one up that was kind of one of those that's a destination place that was in the Highlands of Scotland or an island off Scotland, and then obviously everything was in London. Apart from there were two in the northwest, about an hour and a half, an hour from where I lived, and I wasn't ready to make the jump to go to London, so I thought, well, I'll apply to one of the ones near me, and there's a 2 Michelin star restaurant quite near me, and my dad had been before and liked it. So, it's that blind ambition that I see now with this generation that are all, I should be asking them all for a job. They're so successful and, TikTok megastars and opening chains of restaurants at age 11. But I didn't understand what I was really applying for. I mean, I knew it was the best place I could work, but I probably didn't understand the prestige of it and the experience. And so, yes, I wrote a letter to the owner, and he interviewed me, which is completely random because I was 17. And timing's everything. There was a commis chef that was leaving, which I, didn't know they hadn't advertised. And within 3 months, I was working in a 2 Michelin restaurant in Preston. Wow. That's a big change from the local bistro. So that was the beginning of my journey, and I suppose there's not the the only way is down from there. But wow. I mean, I still the principles of what we did, the striving for excellence, the levels of kind of organization and cleanliness, the discipline, it was amazing, and I still use a lot of it in my day to day, and I'll still think about things. But also huge bullying culture, lots of kind of physical, mental abuse. On reflection, I'm nearly 50, but I was the only girl in the kitchen. It was the week I turned 18. I think that if I had children and I put it this way, if I'd ever told my dad what it was like to be there, I don't think I would have been there for very long. Age old story, we know the industry evolving and we're always trying to do better. And, I don't want it to be one of those, it was an experience that shaped me and I don't regret a second of it at all. It was brilliant. I learned a lot. So much, but and I'm glad that the industry has changed, and it taught me a lot about what I wouldn't do, as we all do with our parents. Well, I won't be like this when I'm an adult, and I had that kind of, when I'm the best head chef in the whole world ever, which is what I would have imagined that I was going to one day be, at that stage. I won't behave like this, and I won't allow this in my kitchens. And certainly, I would say that I made big steps towards it being better. But to say that I got it all right and I didn't let some of the bad habits of obsession and demands on people's hours and lives, I did.
You mentioned a bit earlier how you had a sort of long career in kitchens before sort of venturing out to the different roles that you've had beyond the kitchen. Sort of in those early years, as you did build your career in kitchens, were there any sort of venues or people that were really important to your development as a chef?
Yeah. So many, to be honest. I mean, I was very lucky, obviously, to get that role. I worked with a chef there. He was the head chef there. He was called Andy. He's actually in Australia now. I think he lives in WA. I mean, I haven't seen him for a real long time. He had been a kitchen hand in a 2 or 3 Michelin star kitchen, and worked his way up and was the head chef, and that was pretty impressive. And he showed me a lot, and he gave me a lot of his time. Didn't necessarily protect me from the bullying, but it just wasn't his personality type. But it gave me an opportunity when the company grew and I worked with other people. I worked with a guy, Max Gnoik, who had come from the Gavroche. In fact, Gordon Ramsay had been his junior sous chef, so that was the kind of world that I was working in. Love him or hate him, Max was good to me. I mean, he was tough as anything, but he taught me a lot. And I think the real opportunities probably came when the food became still kind of cooked to order and well commended, but out of the Michelin world, where I worked with some people that really made me understand that the naivety of, make good food and they will come. Mohammed and Mountain, there's a different story. And I think that the real eye-openers, I worked with some great people who made me understand what a business was. A guy called James Gingell back in the UK. Who else is, and I think other operators that I've worked for that actually weren't in the kitchen, but just took the time to help me, I suppose, or some might say that we helped each other. But I think the most eye-opening thing, once you've learned the principles of cooking, is actually sometimes people are more excited about the toilets than they are about what you've put your blood, sweat, and your whole soul into, and actually understanding that and understanding the whole picture. That's been very eye-opening for me.
There's been so many different parts of your career, but you've been culinary director in a few different instances. Tell us about getting into that role where you're kind of looking after multiple venues. Was that a big step for you? I know the nose was a big part of your career in that sense. Tell us what that was like, stepping into a role where you're sort of looking after so many kitchens and so many people.
So I suppose that so once I got to kind of head chef level of kind of busy places that were everybody liked, and and this is Manchester, right? So you're cooking for the Spice Girls and the Beckhams, and at the very early stages of their career. So you're in somewhere fancy when there's a footballer in there in Manchester world, and that still stands true in the Northwest for sure. But I thought, okay, I always wanted to challenge myself. Bit of an illness of many hospo types, I think. Things got too easy, so I thought, okay, well, what can I do next? And obviously, the opportunity was: do I open something of my own, or do I do something else? And I thought, well, no, I don't want to open anything of my own, because I've always been very risk averse as well, until I know how to run a couple of venues at once. So just through someone I knew that I'd worked with, I knew that she was working with a restaurant. I mean, I suppose officially they were a group, so they had 2 venues. They just opened a third. I knew the third; it was local to me. They hadn't done a great job, to be honest, on the third one. They had approached me previously to work with them, and I wasn't really interested. But I thought, okay, this is an opportunity now. This is still a small independent. I think that this might be, well, I suppose selfishly, I thought this might be a good opportunity for me to learn what it's like to run more than one venue and more than one concept. And I think that luckily for me, because they had 2 very established businesses that had been around for like kind of 10 years already, and really nice owners, I got the opportunity to kind of fix that third one and then gradually open a fourth and a fifth. And then it was like a 6, 7, 8, 9, which nearly killed me. But I learned how to manage larger portfolios, but kind of one at a time. And I think that was very helpful, because I have seen people, and I think we all have. We've seen people that have worked in very fancy places, a lot of prestige, great head chef, culinary director, whatever the title is, and then they get put in something with a lot of moving parts, And after the big celebration in all the online magazines, you find out a year later that they've gone and done something else, because let's be honest, they couldn't do it. And that's not because they're not super talented, but it's a juggling act, and you learn to juggle with two balls, right? And then you throw in a third. And then apparently I can't juggle with two, but that's the analogy, right? And I think that it doesn't matter how good you are. So I think I had a great opportunity. Again, timing, luck, all those things come into play. To be part of something that had these, established, it had money in the bank, it had the things, and it saw that I could bring. And I'd worked for a few groups at this point, smaller groups that were expanding. So that was the nose, and that was great. It was a great opportunity, because after we had done the big expansion, then, and this is a life lesson too, and again, bit of luck, bit of hard work, they kind of went, okay, we've just opened all these restaurants really quickly. We hired appropriately, so we had this girl that worked for us, and she was exec chef, and she's done all this, and good job to her. And then we'd also promoted some managers to help us open and given them titles as operations or something. But we don't need all these people now, because we're not going to do a load of growth for a bit. And I was lucky that they decided that I was the person that would be capable of doing both the front and the back of house. So, the stark reality of redundancy, and I have been made redundant in my life only since I came to Australia, but it's happened. And I got to stay, and I got to start to manage the front of house concurrently, and manage both through that period of kind of stabilization, which was great. And obviously the numbers are the same, okay? And we can all say people are the same, but they're definitely not. Anyone who's worked in hospitality knows that chefs and front of house are not the same. You don't manage them in the same way. You don't talk to them in the same way. If you talk to front of house staff the way that we talk to each other in the kitchen, you got a lot of very disgruntled front of house staff. And I appreciate that is a sweeping statement, and I'm not trying to offend anyone, but that was actually probably the biggest learning going into the overarching. Purchasing is the same, rostering is the same, customer service, customer experience. You're still understanding, putting things in the right places, working things properly, but actually it's a different language, it's a different tone, and that was probably the bit that I had to learn. And then I had to learn it again when I came to Australia, because the culture is much more different than I think people realize.
Well, I want to ask you about that, because it's a fascinating statement. What led you to come to Australia in the first place?
Well, I'd been here after I'd worked in, the hatted, the Michelin restaurants and Bib Gourmand. I worked with a couple of Aussie and Kiwi chefs who introduced us to tongs. We didn't use those in the UK back in the day. And we, I suppose that they were probably late teens, early 20s, whatever they were, and they talked about where they were from. And I thought, okay, well, seems like a good idea. I'll go to Australia and, see what happens. So I came over here in 98 originally, worked in a two-hatted restaurant, had a lovely time, and then realized that I'd moved 10,000 miles away from home. And I was working in a kitchen with no windows, 14 hours a day. And I thought, hold on, I could have stayed at home to do this. So I worked in cafes, and they talked about the ingredients. Suddenly they're talking about a lime leaf. I mean, what? What's a lime leaf? No one in England knew that in 1998. They brought more spices. I know that it's very passé now, but Huck, I suspect you're old enough to remember the Thai fish cake that appeared on everybody's menu at some point. And they kind of brought that to the UK, and we didn't have, we had a lot of Chinese food. We didn't have a lot of Thai food. We certainly didn't have any Vietnamese food. We didn't have those flavors. We didn't know what lemongrass was. If you were lucky, you'd get it in a jar, and not in the supermarket. This is in fancy restaurants, right? So it was interesting to me. So I came over, I worked here, and I completely fell in love and said, absolutely, this is where I want to live the rest of my life. Sydney, or certainly Australia, is the place for me. So this is me. I think I was 19, 20 when I got here, and then I left when I was 23. I was lucky enough to get sponsored for a bit. And that was it. I was staying. Everyone knew, my parents knew, and I applied for residency. And then I left the country while they processed my residency. And a year later, I'm at the Australian Embassy in London wondering why I've not heard back. And I didn't get my residency. So yes, wow, indeed, that was what I thought. So bit like, wow. So that was it. I was like, oh, okay. Now, to be fair, at this point, as is the nature of hospitality, I was lucky that the week that I had landed in the UK, I was walking down the street of a little village near my house, as my auntie had said, I'm going to take you to this new restaurant. It's so good, everybody's going. And as I walked in, a chef that I had worked with walked out. And he said, what are you doing here? So I thought you were in Australia. Oh, yeah, I'm back. Oh, we're opening another site. We need you. So as much as I was absolutely heartbroken that my dreams of going to live in Australia were shattered, I had at this point got in with a restaurant group that is now huge. There were only 2 restaurants then. I worked with them. I grew. It was great. But everyone knew Australia was where I wanted to be. I knew, it was that kind of, if you ever win the lotto, what are you going to do, or what are the next steps? And my plan was always to reapply. But I got a job. I got a good job. I was doing well. It was the cool place to be. I was learning loads. I was working with great chefs. I met someone, I then thought, oh, I might buy an apartment. And life happened. And then I always said I'd come back. And then I could see 40 in the distance and thought, why didn't I do that? That was something I wanted to do. I've ticked loads of boxes here. At that point, I kind of, on paper, I think people thought I had it all. I was director of a company. I had a fancy car, a couple of houses. In the north of England, I was known. I was always working. And I still had that itch I wanted to scratch. So, in my late 30s, I applied again, 20 years on. And this time you said yes, so thank you, Australia. You deemed me qualified enough at this point, and I got my PR. And within 18 months, I'd sold, one of my houses. I'd left my the business that I, was working in, and left my company behind and set up shop here.
Well, you've had numerous roles with, Solotel or Compass Group, and also culinary director with Bankstown Sports, was a huge multifaceted venue as well. One thing that I want to pick up on in your experience in Australia, you mentioned culture is very different in hospitality. Tell us a bit about your experiences with that.
I think quite simply, it derives from a couple of things. So one, all of us POMs come over here for a better lifestyle. Ask anyone that's just got off the plane and either moved to Bondi or Balmain, depending on their age, what are you doing here? I want a better lifestyle. I want the sun, but I also want a work-life balance. And so all the kind of laws around employment laws lean much more favourably towards an employee in Australia than they do in the UK and Europe. So, we thought nothing of 14 to 18-hour days. I mean, 18 wasn't the norm in the industry I worked in, but it was the occasional. We thought nothing of expecting someone to work 6 or 7 days a week. And so that's just normal. It's not, and I'm not talking about 2 Michelin stars and being burnt and poked and prodded and teased. I'm just talking about in even the most, normal kind of Ivy chain type restaurant, you might do a 12-hour shift. It's not a thing. Everyone does it. And so you come over here and everyone is, working 38, 40 hours, or most people are. And so the demand's different. And so the way that you manage them is different. And then your expectations on people have to be realigned with that too. And I also think it's funny because as a culture, I'd say Australians are so much more laid back. Everyone says, "Oh, everyone's really friendly here," and all those things, which are true. I suppose that my quite dry and direct approach needed some refinement, I suppose, is the most diplomatic way I could phrase it. So that's not. I mean, I'm not someone who's going to throw things around or have a big tantrum. I've experienced that, and I won't allow that or wish that on anyone or accept that in a place of work. But I think there's and I don't think it's just Australia, actually. I think it's probably as the time that I came and generational changes in the age. But there's a lot more please and thank yous, and a lot more. I'm always big on a good job, but even more, good job. You made it to work, and it's not that I'm not internally a passionate or happy person, but it's softer. It's much softer, not with the customers, not in the customer experience sense, but I think certainly with the staff, kitchen and front of house. I think the expectations are better and more human, but it was an adjustment for me, and it helps me to reflect on, wow, I used to make people work on Christmas Day that have got 4 kids, even though it's the easiest menu day of the whole year, where everyone's already paid, what everyone's eating. Like, you don't need the head chef or the sous chef there on that day, So culturally it was different, and it took me a bit to find my stride, I suppose. And I think there's just cultural references as well, to be honest. Yeah. I was going to say Compass was different because there's actually a lot of Brits work for Compass, or Irish, Scottish. I know you think we're all the same, so that's fine, and we kind of are. But yeah, I think working, Solital, homegrown, very Aussie, big Aussie labour force, and obviously Bankstown. Well, I'd never been to Bankstown when I first talked to them about the role, and actually I'd never been to a club before either, because we don't have those in the UK. So when I first talked to them about the role, my partner is from Bankstown, and said, "Okay, I'll take you." And I was like, I feel like I'm in a mini casino that also Disneyland at the same time. That was kind of my customer experience. But I actually, that wasn't a huge shock in terms of the culture, because I think what I'd learned at Compass Group was a way to learn. I worked with people that weren't necessarily chefs, but were producing food, and that's a different skill. So in that sense, Bankstown wasn't, but certainly a different area to the Balmains and Roselles in the West that I had been living in as a middle-aged woman from the UK. Is the rite of passage.
Earlier on in the episode, we talked a little bit about how at Fine Food Australia you'll be talking about exit strategies and planning for that. Without going into the full presentation that you'll be doing at Fine Food, what's some points or some tips that operators can consider if, an exit strategy, or how do you approach that with a business? Do you have an example of that?
So, like anything, I suppose we want to know what the outcome is, and what they're looking for in the approach. But I suppose it's about contingency. Okay, so it's about thinking, and I mentioned this earlier, but if I fell over and bumped my head on the way to work, what would happen? Who would open the business? Who would work on the coffee machine or the door or the kitchen or whatever your role is? If your role isn't that hands-on, that's okay. Who can pick up payroll in your absence? So I think that there's huge amounts to what we do. But when I say exit strategy, like I said, it's a two-parter. It's exit to sale, but also exit to make sure you don't leave a liability. So just ask yourself, it's like customer experience. It's the same thing. You have to put yourself in that walk around the business for your customer experience lens. Use a lens of what would happen if tomorrow I was not able to do what I do now. Okay. And what's the backup plan, short term and long term? And I think that if you actually just apply that lens when you think about what you do in a day, in a week, in a month, you're already protecting yourself. And I think you've got to remember you're protecting your employees too. If your business fails through no fault of your own, but just through circumstance, if your business shuts down tomorrow, what happens to the other people that are reliant on your business? So, and I know we're all a bit, mean about suppliers. Oh, well, they'll be fine. They're all got loads of money, I've seen his car. But you've got people that are working for you that you really care about and that have given a lot for you and help you get where you are. So, I suppose that's what I would say. Use that lens. Think about it. What do I do in a day? Who's going to do it if I'm not here? How will the business survive? Does that? I don't know if that answers the question or not, but.
Yeah, no, that's a really fascinating approach, and I don't think many people step back and take that view. What's it been like for you moving to Australia and taking the skills that you have and consulting in here? Has it changed your approach or your view of hospitality, the sort of different UK, Australian sort of approaches?
No, I think that I think it's very, very similar. I think it's the same, and I say that as well. If you think about working in a 2-Michelin-star kitchen where the maximum packs or covers you'll ever do is 90 on a world record breaking day, and then a Bankstown Sports Club, or when I worked for Compass Group, I think that we would probably be feeding like 8,000 people a day. The principles are the same. Hospitality is the same. It doesn't matter if it's Michelin star or catering assistant making breakfast. It's the same, and I think that it's the same here because we have the same problems, and we have the same solutions. Our cost of goods, some of the metrics are slightly different, I suppose. Because wages are higher here, for example, certain supplies will be cheaper here. There's some of those I had to learn, and actually one of the big. You wouldn't even think about it, but actually one of the biggest obstacles, especially when I was at Compass Group, is actually what you call things. So, we all say that we speak the same language, but we don't talk about COGS, for example, in the UK. We talk about GP, right? It's the same thing, different expression. You guys love shortening things. You're just making things into letters and dots, and I'm not very good at that. I don't know if my dyslexia. And so actually the only obstacles I've had, because the problems are the same, is understanding the lingo, because you can find the metrics initially through the internet and then very quickly by working in a business and looking at their P&Ls. So that bit's the same, but yeah, it's what you call things being different. Even I think you call something tag and test here that we call something, it's just those things. I'm like, what are these people talking about? So yeah, honestly, it's a ridiculous answer, I know, but that's the only real difference, because people are people.
Well, you've had a huge impact on many businesses and continue to do that. But what do you love about what you do?
The bit that I absolutely get up in the mornings for is knowing that I've made a difference and made a positive difference. And like when I was at Bankstown, the team that I built, the difference that I made to their work life, their results. I love teaching people things. And I get this opportunity now where I'm working consulting again, but also in this kind of exit strategy space where I can really make a difference for someone, like a huge difference, without being, not because I'm some smarty pants genius, but you don't know what you don't know, and I work with some two really lovely boys, men. 6 months ago, they called me. They've got a business. They super passionate, great product. They built it from a little coffee caravan into a big cafe bakery. So nice. Top line. So, revenue, sales, brilliant. Everything else almost burst into tears. and I don't just mean from a selling point of view, which the business is now listed for sale, but actually they weren't making any money from it. And they were working the business all the time, and they didn't need to. They absolutely didn't need to, because they had the thing that most people are desperate for, which is these great sales, which is all through this, it's a vocation, right? Same with, they put in all the passion and all the love, but they didn't know all the corporate stuff, all the numbery stuff. And I've done a lot of the corporate numbery stuff, and there's a reason that I don't do that anymore. And don't get me wrong, I love working for Compass, but I can now get all that stuff that I learn, all the tricks, all the tips, all the negotiations, all the, what you can do, all the systems, and I can give that to people that I think are more deserving. And and then who am I to judge? And so these boys now, 6 months, and they've worked hard. I told them the thing that they needed to do, and I held the hand for a little bit, and within 6 months they're now making 50-60k net profit for themselves every month in a business where they were making no money, but it was always there. They just need it. And to be able to do that for someone by just sharing what I know, that's, I mean, why wouldn't you want to do that for a job?
Well, I'm sure you're going to change people's lives when you give that presentation in Fine Food coming up in September. But Olivia, absolutely pleasure to have you on the show today. Please keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
All right. Take care. Thanks, Huck. Take care.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Stay safe and be well.